Tonight, time for some power rankings. There's movement. There was some definitive results this week. There are some teams that I feel have established themselves as contenders, and some that are on their way, and some that are falling out. And tonight was a big night for some teams. So let's get things underway. A team that was 30th last week is 31st this week, and that's Buffalo. So the Sabres right now, in my eyes, are the worst team in the league. And I don't think any Sabres fans are going to necessarily argue with me on that. At the same time, number 30 is Arizona, who's gone 2 games without a regulation loss. It's something. At this point, it's all about saving face. It's all about getting enough points so that we're not talking about how they were worse than the Colorado Avalanche last year. And Arizona absolutely looks like they could be just as bad or worse. In 29th spot, and dropping 2 spots from last week is Vancouver. If they'd held that 2-0 lead on Toronto, if they hadn't blown that lead and lost it in a shootout, they would have probably moved up, and I only mean probably. Vancouver's in a tough spot. They do have a lot of key injuries. There's a lot of guys out. I think they're tired. They hurt. Tanev gets hurt tonight. He's just back from injury, and then he's hurt again. Vancouver, they're not contenders, and they're not contenders for the playoffs. And to me, that's becoming more and more apparent with every passing week. I know there are Canuck fans who still have hope. The only thing I say is just watch Besser. Like, if you look at the save percentage of the Canucks, even for instance, the first month of the season, I think they showed tonight they were like 9-10, and then in December they had some horrific 860 or 870 save percentage between their 2 goaltenders. You don't go anywhere with that. And I had expected their goaltending to be middle of the road this year. It hasn't been middle of the road. It's been pretty abysmal some nights. Where you watch goal after goal go in and you're thinking, man, geez, Miller would have saved that last year. It's kind of where I'm at. It's not much fun. At number 28, also moving down 2 spots, and they could very well move up out of this, but Montreal has some issues. And I'm not sure how you fix it, but we've already got 2 Canadian teams on the board, and we're only 4 teams in. This is bad. Carey Price may single-handedly drag them to respectability, but their goal scoring issues are going to drag them right back down. Price can't stand on his head forever, and there just isn't a sniper in the lineup other than Pacioretty, who is not going as he should. 9 goals at this point in the season for Pacioretty. He's on pace for 18 or 20. That's just not going to do it. He's your number 1 goal scorer. So for me, Montreal right now has some major issues. And then you look at their blue line, and Shea Weber now is shut down till at least the All-Star break. That's another huge blow to a team that didn't really need that. They're not in a position where they need that. While we're talking about Canada moving up 2 spots based on their last 2 games is Ottawa. They're up to 27th. There's life in those Senators. 27th is where they're at. They could move up over the next couple of weeks. I'm not anticipating that they will. I think there's a lot of issues still there. You're not going to score 6 goals a night in the NHL. I don't care what the Tampa Bay Lightning tell you. It's not really all that possible. And I don't care what Vegas tells you, because those guys, there's something with Vegas. Something weird. But for Ottawa tonight, it was a big win. And for me, that bumped them up to 27th. I'd had them in 28th. And after the win last night, I'd bumped them up from 29th. So it's a gradual move for them, because for me, there are teams ahead of them that have been playing better. And I want to see more out of them before I say, oh yeah, no, they're good. In 26th, also showing signs of life, are the Detroit Red Wings. They're up 2 spots from last week. not really feeling that Detroit's necessarily going to make the playoffs, but at least they're playing relatively well recently. 26th is still a spot I didn't think I'd see Detroit in. I mean, 5 years ago, I never would have figured that Detroit would ever hit this. We had always talked about, and this goes back to when they won cups in 97 and 98. Well, Detroit's going to need to do a rebuild. Yeah, but those guys are old. Detroit's going to need to do a rebuild. And then they'd find more. And they wouldn't need a rebuild. Now we're in the spot where they do need it. And it's going to happen. But they're still maintaining a half-decent record. If they get Dahlin, if they somehow win the draft lottery and get Dahlin, they're going to be very dangerous indeed. It's going to be a very, very dangerous team. In 25th place, and they're actually moving down one spot from last week, is Florida. Florida's playing pretty well, and they did suffer a couple of defeats this week. It did push them back a spot, but I still think Florida's playing relatively well, and I still think that even just being here and being ahead of these teams means that Florida's a little better than we had expected, and they've been playing better lately. They have been as low as 29th on this board. So the fact they're 25th, well, it's not where you want to be. It's better than where they've been. So they moved back one spot this week, and why? Because Pittsburgh moved up one spot. So Pittsburgh's in the bottom row again, but they've moved up a spot based on that game against the Islanders. I really think that for Pittsburgh, they are close to turning the corner. And Jari is the better goaltender. And I'm just coming right out and saying that because I've been hinting at it for weeks. But Jari's the better goaltender. And at some point, Pittsburgh's going to have to just bite the bullet and admit it and have Jari playing and Murray sitting a little bit. Maybe that's what Murray needs. But for Pittsburgh to stay in the playoff hunt and to get back up to where they were on this board, to stop the bleeding, I think Jari's the guy they have to go to. It's just, and I hate to say it because I know it sounds bad, but anyways, 23, dropping 2 spots from last week, is Philly. And coming into today, Philly was down in here. They beat St. Louis. They move up. Philly is maddening to watch. They look so good some days, and then the next game, it's just, and then they're crap. It's an alarming trend that does not translate to playoffs. And as good as they look today, they could look just that bad tomorrow. Look at them in the game against Pittsburgh, and yeah, it's really frustrating to watch them. I can't imagine how it is for fans of the Flyers. It's got to be really frustrating too. Now, dropping like a rock, dropping 6 spots from last week. Wow. And I could have justified putting them down to 24th. I could have. But I dropped them to 22nd, and this time next week they may very well be down to 25th. This has been a really, really, really bad run for the Oilers. And it's not improving. That whole, the self-respect and the players saying, hey, we got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. The things going on with Calgary, the things going on with Colorado, the things going on with teams that have been down and they've said, you know what, we got to be better. It's not happening with the Oilers. And the funny part to me is, if it was any other coach, their job's on the line. I don't believe Todd McClellan's on the verge of getting fired. But if it was any other coach in Edmonton, absolutely, he'd be on his way out the door. But while I do think that if they miss the playoffs like this by the end of the season, if it doesn't get better, McClellan likely loses his job. That would be Chiarelli protecting his own. I remember how quickly Boston went from contender to being out of the playoffs, and Boston couldn't fire Chiarelli fast enough. He had butted heads with the brain trust in Boston one too many times, and they wanted to get rid of him. And once Boston missed the playoffs, they had the excuse. That could happen with Edmonton as well. Absolutely could. This is unacceptable, and it's another Canadian team down here. We're already up to the 4th Canadian team, and I'm only at the 22nd spot. It'd be fine if you had 20 Canadian teams, but it's not. We've got over half the Canadian teams, and I've only got 9 on the board. No, I've got 1, 2, yeah, I got 10 on the board. My math, yeah, whatever. All right, number 21, and they drop a spot, and they were going to move up. I was ready for them to move up. I thought this was going to be a big week for them. And then Vegas was Vegas. I don't know where Chicago's going. I don't know what's going to happen with their goaltending. Glass has been good. We all want Glass to be this great story and this inspirational story. Whether that story continues in Chicago or they decide to rent him out to somebody who needs goaltending remains to be seen. But he's been okay, but he's not Corey Crawford. He's not going to make anybody forget Corey Crawford. And I don't know that any goaltender would right now in Chicago. This is an issue. Absolute issue. And let's go to number 20. These guys also drop a spot this week. That's Carolina. And they had moved up a lot. And now it looks like everything's all falling apart again. I didn't like seeing Sebastian Aho getting hurt during the game. Hope there's nothing lingering there. I didn't like anything about this game from a Carolina perspective, and I'm a Boston fan, but I've really been pulling for Carolina. And the way that game went down, that's just humiliating. On the upside, usually after a humiliating game like that, a team will come back and play better the next game. You don't want to be playing like that. You just don't. So for Carolina, this is a rough finish to the week. Cam Ward, who I talked up a lot, he allows 2 goals right away at the start of the game. Darling comes in, and he allows 5. So I'm not sure where you go with that for Carolina, but there's a lot of work left to be done. Number 19, dropping 5 spots from last week, are the Islanders. Look out below. And this is weird because now you've got 1, 2, 3 teams in the Metro that are all in this spot, and a 4th right here. So the almighty Metro that I've been talking a lot about how great it is, isn't looking very great right now. And you'll notice that there's been quite the shift in the power rankings in terms of which divisions have teams that are higher up. It's evening out as the season goes along. The Islanders need to stop the bleeding, and they need to replace Thomas Greiss. They have to. Greiss's numbers are ugly. You can't have Greiss in games. You just can't. And I'm not sure if it's going to involve a trade. I'm not sure if maybe Jeff Glass is going to go to the Island. I don't know. But this is a disaster for the Islanders because offensively they're playing well. This isn't on their offense. And I don't think it's necessarily on their defensemen a lot either. Nick Leddy's had a very good season. And so have a lot of the other blue liners in New York. It's just, it seems like every game I see Islanders goaltenders allowing goals, and I'm like, I probably should have had that. And it's uncomfortable, but look where the Islanders are. They're not in the playoffs right now in the standings either. This is legit. They've had a nice, long period of falling down the rankings, and it's not looking like it's going to get better anytime soon. They've got to fix their issues. All right, number 18, moving up 5 spots from last week, are the Ducks. They almost came back and won it tonight in Calgary. They didn't. But the Ducks are putting the NHL on notice that they intend to make the playoffs. And if they'd got that game to overtime tonight, I really think they would have won it. They're aggravating. Corey Perry is aggravating to watch. I know there's a lot of people, Anaheim fans, who are very vocal about Bieksa playing, feel that they'd be better off without him. I thought he did well with some shot blocks tonight. He does have mobility issues. I think the reason why he's in Anaheim's lineup as much as he is his compete level. And I think he's very popular with his teammates. I think if he was in the press box, I think there'd be players who would be upset with it. So Anaheim continues to roll with him, and they're moving up Despite the loss against Calgary tonight, and they've got, I believe that was game 3 of a 5-game road trip, the Ducks look like they're headed in the right direction, which is bad news for the rest of the Western Conference. Number 17, dropping 2 spots from last week, are Columbus. How does this happen? How is Columbus down to 17th? And it's funny because it was like 2 weeks ago that I had Columbus fans commenting on my page saying, just drop them. Drop them way down. The board will catch up. The board always catches up. And it has caught up to Columbus. So now you got Columbus, New York, Carolina, Philly, Pittsburgh. That's more than half the Metro Division, and I haven't reached the halfway mark of the league yet. That's a lot. And it's kind of stunning in that it wasn't that long ago, at least I don't think it was that long ago. Columbus was in the top row. The Islanders were in the top row. Pittsburgh was at least in the second. Philly had a spot. I think they had a spot in the second, or at least early in the third. And Carolina's been mostly in the bottom, but they looked like they were in the right direction too. And then today, just everything blows up because without today's result, they're likely 18th. I might be able to justify having Carolina 17th if not for today's result. So the Metro is weakening. Now, number 16, moving up 6 spots from last week. The highest spot they've been all year, the Colorado Avalanche. Again, a couple weeks ago, being accused of not paying attention to Colorado. Colorado's playing well. I knew they were playing well. But again, if it's a shootout win, if it's a close win, you'll move up 1 spot with a close win, an overtime win. A shootout win I treat as a tie, so I may move a team up, I may not. But Colorado has started winning games and dominating them. And winning them from beginning to end. And this is why they've moved up so much. So it's not a matter of me having just certain favorites and leaving them there. It's how much did they win by? Who did they beat? So strength of schedule matters. Colorado has started beating good teams. Their schedules got tougher, and their record has stayed good. So they're up where they are. And as I said in the review video I did, that's uploading as I'm talking about this, if you haven't watched Colorado, watch them. Some of the most entertaining hockey in the league right now. Just fantastic. Number 15. And these guys move up 2 spots this week. If Calgary had blown that game, you'd be seeing Columbus in the second row. But the Flames are back in the second row for the first time in a while. They've won 3 in a row. And they look pretty good. Blowing a 2-goal lead at home is concerning, if not for the fact that Dougie Hamilton scores that winner. And they end up winning the game. The important part is they win the game, and the Flames right now look like they're ready to make a move and catch up with these guys. So anyways, the Flames are at 15, and we start moving our way through the second row of the board. At 14, and these guys moved up 4 spots. See, I knew during the week that there was going to be some big movement. Minnesota. They lose 7-2 tonight. Minnesota was up to 12th coming into tonight. This team is finally healthy, and they look pretty darn good right now. They didn't look good tonight. Don't pay any attention to tonight. Or was Colorado simply that good? You guys can decide. Or was Dubnyk that bad? You guys can decide. But for me, Minnesota right now is 14th. I do see them as a playoff team with their current roster, despite the result tonight. And yet at the same time, for them to be a playoff team, they have to survive in a Central Division that is really pretty tough. So let's look for Central Division teams to this point in the countdown. You've got Chicago, Colorado, Minnesota. It's a pretty tough division. And meanwhile, in the Pacific, you got Arizona and Vancouver right down here next to each other. And Edmonton's down here. The Atlantic, you got Montreal, Ottawa, Detroit, and Florida. It's an interesting board. All right, at number 13. Oh, look, these guys stayed exactly the same as last week. San Jose. San Jose is still cruising. They still look good. All right. I just had to pause because my cat was choking on string over here. So it was like either let him die or keep going. So I decided to pause. All right. So yeah, San Jose stays where they were. Famously, of course, Joe Thornton got some beard ripped out this week. As far as I know, the beard has grown another Joe Thornton. That's always been my suspicion, anyways, that his beard hair would just grow another Joe. Um, San Jose is definitely a playoff contender. They look good to make the playoffs. Um, but yeah, so San Jose is in the thick of it. They're in a playoff spot. They've got Calgary on their tail, and they've got Anaheim on their tail too. So they got to be careful. Number 12, and down from last week by 2 spots, are the Leafs. You can look at it 2 ways. They won tonight in a shootout, or they were behind 2-0 to the Canucks, and didn't particularly look great against the Canucks. So, and coming into tonight's game, they've had a rough week. So, Toronto moves down, and their spot at 12th in my eyes is justified. They were down to, I believe I had them at 14th at one point this week. Because of tonight's result, and again with shootouts, I treat them like ties. I didn't move them down or up. It's just if they had won that game in regulation, they probably would have moved up a spot. But we're getting into the region where it gets harder and harder to move up. Although it's not that hard to move down. There's a team moving down. They moved down 3 spots this week. And that's the Blues. What are the Blues? Well, with Carter Hutton, they're an excellent team, very good at shutting other teams down. With Jake Allen, they're not. And that's just reality. And I'm wondering, and they even asked during a broadcast when Carter Hutton's going to start stealing starts from Jake Allen. Very soon. I imagine that could happen extremely soon, actually. I still think the Blues are going to end up moving back up, but I don't know by how much, and I don't know when. It's been a rough stretch for them for the last month, and it looks like they're not in a position where long term they're going to still be in one of those top 3 positions. Moving up 2 spots into 10th this week are the Rangers. Now I understand Kreider's out, and that's a large hole for the Rangers, but they're still getting decent results. And that's all I care about. I don't look at injury lists when I do this. I don't look at an injury and go, oh, I got to drop them down because somebody's hurt. I just look at the results. Injuries don't really concern me. It's a matter of results. And the Rangers are still getting decent results, and they were able to pass a couple teams this week on my board because they're playing very well. They have the odd bad start here and there, but they're generally playing very well. And I know Leaf fans are going to argue that they were playing well, but the results haven't really been there over the last 7 days. And they've been sort of iffy in terms of the win-loss record since the return of Austin Matthews. At 9th, moving up 2 spots from last week, are the Dallas Stars. Dallas genuinely took all their anger and frustration out on Edmonton today. And Dallas has been playing very, very good hockey. They're at home, and they're better at home than they are on the road. And I get that. I understand that when they do go out on the road, they'll likely drop. They're in a bye week. And I've been asked before about bye weeks. So if your team's in a bye week, it shouldn't affect their standing unless teams behind them are winning a bunch of games or teams in front of them are losing. I don't change the way I do anything on the board because somebody's in a bye week. I just keep doing it the same, and eventually it'll all even out. So it's not a concern. Dallas is playing the best hockey they've played all year, and they look like a very confident team. It was nice to see them paying tribute to Marty Turco on the broadcast today, and it was a fun game to watch. I genuinely had a fun time watching 2 of my favorite teams out of the 3, which is all I can really ask for. Number 8, and dropping 3 spots. More because teams are just playing really well right now, and there's teams that have moved back into the top row. Well, there's one team that's moved back into the top row, and Jersey, and I've seen comments where their fans are concerned about the upcoming schedule. I know they play home, road, home, road, home, road. Like, that's really weird. That's a strange schedule. But when you look at who they're playing, they're winnable games. I would say maybe one you can look at and go, well, they're not going to win that one. But every other game they have in January is winnable. And I do expect them to play well because they have so many rookies. Rookies don't know that schedules are screwy. They just play. It's sort of like last year with the Leafs. These guys just didn't know better. And sometimes that's the best thing that you can have on your team is just guys who don't know better. Jersey will definitely figure it out. And I really think this schedule I think it'll benefit them, to be honest. No long road trips, no long homestands. And these games that they play on the road are all close to Jersey. It's not like if Vancouver was doing this, where to be road, home, and they're going back east. Like this is all East Coast, and it's pretty contained. And I think New Jersey's going to do well. I think New Jersey's going to move back into the top row as soon as next week. But dropping in that top row, and the only reason they're back in the top row is because they won tonight, is Nashville. Nashville started to show some cracks. And tonight's game is a sign that maybe they're coming out of that. But there has to be some concerns in Nashville. And now I would say maybe Nashville will be looking for some kind of shoring up the team at the deadline kind of thing. And I don't know if you're looking for depth forwards or what you're looking for. I will say this. Austin Watson getting 2 goals tonight for the Preds. That's the kind of production that they need from their bottom six. They need these guys to pitch in. And with Philip Forsberg on the IR, you're going to need some guys to step up. A lot of the reason I think that Nashville is having struggles is the loss of Philip Forsberg. As I said with the Rangers, injury lists don't concern me when it comes to power rankings. And I'm just looking at the results, but they're definitely feeling the effects of Forsberg being out. Back into the top row, and they're at 6th, despite the loss tonight are the Kings. And the Kings were 5th coming into tonight. Kings have looked good again. They're back in the thick of it. I think having Vegas ahead of them is good for them. I think it gives them a target, it gives them something to chase. And even though they were behind 3-1 against Nashville, they didn't give up. And, they almost came back and tied that one. Closing seconds, they were buzzing around the net. They were very close to tying it. And good game for them. Good win for Nashville, as I said before, but a good game for the Kings. And that's the kind of matchup I would expect from top 10 teams. Now, in 5th place, and moving up 4 spots from last week, are Winnipeg. Winnipeg is intimidatingly good at home. And if they start getting that way on the road, look out rest of NHL. Maybe even look out Vegas. Because Winnipeg isn't that far off from the league leading points. I think they're 6 points back of Tampa right now. And they're playing some very solid hockey. Hellebuck is playing very, very well. And I do think that Hellebuck, if he continues this, will be in a Vezina conversation by the end of the year. I don't see him winning it, but I think he'll be in that conversation. It'll be interesting to see what happens if he is. Number 4, and moving down 1 spot from last week, are the Capitals. Washington is still in a position where I view them as a surprising contender. But yeah, I'll put them in that category right now. They're playing very, very well. And I don't know that I'd want to play them in the first round of the playoffs this year because they're going to be very angry from last year and the year before and the year before. And you get it. There's a lot of baggage with the Capitals, which can work one of 2 ways. Either, they go ahead and choke in the first round, or there's finally a run in the Washington Capitals. And maybe, we're getting that crazy part of the year. It's the new year, so I start believing in Washington again because they're going to crush my soul again in the playoffs. At 3, and these guys are putting me in a really bad position. I have to say, the Boston Bruins are putting me in a really bad position. They're playing so well right now. They're playing well on the blue line. Their forwards are playing well. Rask is playing well. Hudobin was solid today. Boston's playing some of the best hockey in the league. Colorado's probably the most entertaining to watch and the one that's up and coming, and Boston's right there with them. Boston took a Carolina team that was coming into today seemingly on an upswing and destroyed them. And Boston laid into the Islanders not too long ago, and they had no problem with the Senators, who just beat Tampa. You can argue strength of schedule, and that's fine. That's fine if you want to, but they've been playing really well for over a month. Boston's been playing really well for over a month, and they're not losing games. They're just playing some really solid hockey right now, and this is the most fun I've had watching Boston in 5 years. It's been 5 years since I've had this much fun watching Boston. It's really pretty great. So we've got 2 and 1. And number 2, they were number 1 at one point this week. And they were number 2 at one point this week. Vegas loses to St. Louis. Tampa loses in a shootout to Toronto. And I felt like I was in a difficult position. Tampa lost in a shootout to Montreal. Tampa's loss to Ottawa tonight shows that this is a dip for Toronto for Tampa. A loss to Ottawa shows there's some weakness in an otherwise strong lineup. Vasilevsky showed cracks tonight that he doesn't normally, and Vegas is Vegas. When they lost to St. Louis this week, they lost. That was one of the best losses I've seen a team take. Played very well. Marc-Andre Fleury played great. And then against Chicago, Subban looked very human early on, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Subban's finally going to have a bad game. Vegas is finally going to lose a lopsided game. And then Vegas came back and beat Chicago. As soon as Vegas got that first goal, I'm like, and Vegas wins. And it is a weird thing to watch games with Vegas. Because no matter what the score is, in the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, but Vegas is going to win. Like, even though Subban was mortal and looked human, I was like, yeah, but Vegas will just score 5 or whatever. Like, it's weird. The podcast I did last night, for instance, that was when Vegas beat Chicago, right? I know I was talking about Vegas in the podcast, and yeah, when Vegas beat Chicago, I wasn't really surprised. They're playing the best hockey in the league. Whether they're winning or they're losing, they're still playing the best hockey in the league. And just as soon as you go, all right, now that looks like a first-year team, then they get it all together. They're the best coach team in the league. No doubt in my mind. Now that we've got that done, I did promise that by the midway mark I'd start doing this. Awards. Stanley Cup, I still think belongs to Tampa. Vezina Trophy, I say goes to Vasilevsky. Sorry, I spelled that so badly. Rocket Richard Trophy, I got a funny feeling Ovechkin's going to win it. Just for Ovechkin reasons. Art Ross Trophy, right now Kucherov has a nice lead, and I think he could very well win it. Now, the Hart Trophy is where it gets kind of tricky. Because there's nobody in Vegas who really qualifies as a Hart contender. Because it's a team effort. You can't give Gerard Gallant the Hart. You might want to think about it, but you can't. So, for me, if I'm giving out the Hart right now, it's probably going to go to Stamkos. I looked at the Norris Trophy too, and I said, all right, out of the defensemen who are playing well, who's most likely? The most likely in my eyes right now is Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty is likely the Calder winner right now, or the Norris winner, and the Calder Trophy with 22 goals. I do believe Brock Besser has the inside track on that trophy. So there you go. Trophy winners, power rankings, week 13. We're in 2018. And one last thing. This was a request from a patron. And I figured, I might as well do this while I'm not allowed to forget. Did you see what my name is on here, though?
You touch it.
You can't.
I know, Shannon.
You can't.
You're the one that did that, not me.
Can't do that.
I'm not the one that did it. That's you.
No, you did it. When you handed it over, it showed. My name is something crude. All right. Let me go ahead and zoom in. This is Elias. He's a month premature.
Yes.
Patron asked me to go ahead and give a shout out to his child, who is breathing on his own.
He's having trouble breathing.
Well, he's not on the tubes here though, so that's good.
Yes.
He's having trouble breathing, but with proper oxygenation, baby will be fine. And he's eating on his own, isn't he? That's what I said.
Yeah, it's just his lungs he's having trouble with.
So, baby's having trouble with his lungs, but my thoughts go out to Elias and to his father, and I appreciate his support. And if we were in an area where we could go down and visit the baby, we probably would, because I like babies. That's part of what gets me into these messes. Anyways, hi.
What messes are you talking about, Shannon?
None. There's no messes I'm talking about.
You're trouble.
So there's the power rankings. There's the awards. And thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. I understand this was a little longer than normal, but I sometimes feel like I have to explain. And there's been weeks where I just go, here you go, and I just go. I'm earlier than it was last week, so I'll just go ahead and explain all these. And, yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Let the arguments begin.